can't make money. I mean, you know, but about about a third of it, or maybe more, is subsidized. You know, the institution is subsidized by the government.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call our meeting to order. And we'll start off with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States
of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, could you take roll, please?
So I don't know, nothing's working really.
Christopher Abel.
Here.
Biff Hansen.
Here.
Matthew Phipps.
Here.
Stacy Seldner.
Here.
Matthew Spalding.
Here.
Gary Trask. Tony Bostelica.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have public input. I do have 3 individuals. Is there anyone else that didn't turn one in that wanted to speak tonight? Okay, so our first guest is Braden Meyer. If you come up. Braden, if you would just say your name and address for the record, please.
Ray Myers, 10 Whitewater Drive. It is no secret that for many months now, our economy has been in shambles. Inflation has reached an all-time high since the 1970s, making it difficult for districts like ours to operate without a funding increase. Last year, America experienced a negative GDP growth, which is really a GDP decrease, for 2 quarters, marking a recession. To help combat these factors, there is a great way that our district can help our economy through these times. The way to do that is by prioritizing the purchase of American products over foreign products. A school district requires a lot of materials and services. When these are bought domestically rather than foreign, that money stays in our economy. As the money stays within our economy, it goes toward American organizations and individuals. These entities then have more money for themselves. The result from that is 1, more money can be spent on products. 2, employees can be kept with an increased likelihood of a higher salary. 3, inflation won't rage as much as it has been. And 4, there would be an overall economic growth for all citizens, including our students. There may even be more or larger donations to our district. Think about this. If our district provided any type of service or materials, we would like people to buy from us rather than a corporation from across the world. Buying from our homeland not only spurs our economy, but spurs our morality. We share the values of our people more than any foreign entity ever could. It feels great when you buy an American-made product over one which could have been bought outside our country. Only if a product is not made in America should the district buy products from a foreign land. If a product must be bought from a foreign land, it should not be from one which uses immoral child labor production or one which is run by a socialist regime. Regimes such as the Chinese Communist Party should not have any leverage for an advancement in their influence over the world. The CCP has already infiltrated our institutions through social theories. Let's not give them fiscal assistance as well. Our fellow countrymen deserve all the help they can reasonably receive. Our school district can provide that help to make this difference in everyone's lives. We all live between the same borders. We all pledge allegiance to the red, white, and blue, and we all watch the fireworks in July. When you look around America and notice gas has reached $8 per gallon, you have to wonder, what if we all just bought American? Thank you.
Thank you, Brady. Our next guest is Jennifer Gleitner. And I have your address here, so you don't have to do it out loud.
Okay, great, thank you. I usually prepare something when I come here, but I didn't today because I feel like I can speak from the heart. And it won't change the situation at all. What I'm going to say won't change anything. But I hope that the impact that it has is that it will make people think about the impact of things that they say publicly. The comment that I'm referencing is earlier this week, Superintendent File was on Be Our Guest on WOMT and made a comment regarding that there are no free lunches. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And while we as adults all know that, children don't understand that. Children don't pay taxes. And children ultimately are the ones being stigmatized when their lunch tray is being taken from them and they're being given a bag lunch, symbolizing the fact that they cannot afford food, a very basic need, which most of us learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in high school psychology class. So, bottom of your pyramid's not met, you're not going to advance. I wanted to tell a story because I feel like that's a really impactful way to help people understand the impact of their language. My father in the early 1980s was a proud shipbuilder, like an actual shipbuilder. And by no fault of his own, he was laid off and lost his job. And our family was forced to go on public assistance. This was in the days where you had food stamps. You didn't have the discrete debit card that we now know today. And at 3 and 4 years old, my family would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to the next town over to the 24-hour grocery store so that we did not have to be seen using food stamps, because there's a stigma apparently with being hungry. During that same period of time, my father and local church leaders and other individuals helped form the Two Rivers Ecumenical Pantry, which is still in operation today in 2023. He did this while we were on welfare. Another experience that I can speak from is I worked at Lincoln High School for 5 years. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that there was not one single day that went by that a hungry child did not come to my office. And I, at the time, being somebody who made less than $20 an hour, was providing snacks out of my own money to help feed kids granola bars, or have a bottle of water, or whatever I could muster up to bring, because they didn't have food. I can't tell you how I felt at 3 or 4 years old being on public assistance, because I quite frankly don't remember. What I can tell you is that today I'm standing here in front of you as a successful college-educated professional because somebody somewhere along the way thought that it was a good thing that I ate. So I guess my whole point is that while me saying any of this doesn't change the fact that you refused funding that was available so that children didn't have to be stigmatized for being poor, a choice they didn't make. You can maybe understand the impact of your language on a public radio program and understand how that makes people in our community feel. I'm a lifelong resident of this area, and I care very deeply about the people here. And it's very insulting that someone from the outside would come here and make such crude statements, especially someone who is supposed to be a leader in a school district that serves children. So please, take some time to think before you speak. Thank you.
Jennifer. And our next guest is Dawn Erdman. And Dawn, I have your address here as well, so you don't.
Good evening. I've been speaking out about my concerns regarding age-inappropriate reading materials in the public library for over 2 years. Basically to deaf ears. I'm sure Mr. Abel, the library board president, might remember my efforts for reconsidering to move some of the books to the adult section. I even tried to appeal to the library board's decision when they wouldn't allow me to appeal that. Now it's come to my attention that some of the same books are in our schools' libraries. I am curious who and how the decision was made to add these books to the school's library. Do the librarians and teachers use their own discretion? Do they use the guidance of the Manitowoc Public Library regarding what they choose? Do they use reference resources like the Manitowoc Public Library, such as quick picks for reluctant young adult readers? Even some of the book titles should also cause a second look. Do the students request? Do the parents request? Example, The Haters. This book is rated by booklooks.org as a 4 on a 1 to 5 scale. This organization actually rates the contents for appropriateness. Some excerpts from the book. It was definitely my boner. No one was awake to stare in disgust at the lurchy jailbreak of my sleep boner. I still had the boner, masturbated in a brisk, businesslike manner into the sink with the hotel conditioner. Let's skip a little further along. And I might use a different word than what they have. The moment she put me inside her, I came. I mean the exact moment. Puck, I said, and I curled up around her like a snail, and I kept coming about 100 times, and I said, puck, 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 until she said, shh, and pushed me back down into my back, and I just lay on top of me, and that's how it happened. No, come on, you're fucking with me. I wish I was you. Maybe 10 steps out of my room and then you get stopped right down in the middle of the floor and immediately start pucking? Another portion. Smoke a bowl before the third round of painful pucking. Can we talk oral sex technique? A little? You gotta slow it down, and I mean way down. Just really simplify what you're doing in general. Try to make circles with your tongue. More examples. Just sit there completely still with your mouth open and hope I would start pucking your face and you wouldn't have to do anything. Now, those are just a few of the pieces from the book, The Haters. So remember, we can rate movie attendance by not allowing access, and there are many other things we don't allow minors to do. Then there's genderqueer, also rated a 4 by Booklooks. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay, now this is in Lincoln High School. These are not the classics. There are so many more, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Did you ever hear about Libby or about the Wisconsin Digital Library? Take a quick trip with me if you would. Grab your phones. Put in the Wisconsin Digital Library Consortium. Type in this author's name, Sweet, Lisa. Pick out her book. 365 sex positions. Go to the free samples and see what you see. No name, no age, no library card. I question if any school access is allowed to those websites, considering they're from Wisconsin Library. So don't hit me up with being a book banner. I prefer age-appropriate placement practitioner. I understand this is out there in plain sight and search, but I don't believe my taxpayer money should go to any of this. I might not have the appropriate degrees, but I know what trash is, and having it available to impressionable, possibly confused innocent minds is not what I want to pay for. The plan of action? Well, I have heard some of this useless material might now be looked into, which is thumbs up. But how many years did it take to get this garbage into our library? I'm thankful that this board is trying to repair the Manitowoc School District's issues. It's been a long time coming. With the plan of action, I'm not aware of their current process, but possibly the school librarians should await further book additions at this time. Have new choices be put on a waiting list for review and approval first. I would hope most book choices wouldn't have to be scrutinized that thoroughly, and there are much more appropriate reference resources out there. Reevaluate the questionable material that is already there. Reassign it to some adult library for their shelves, not our schools. Fix what is there first before adding any more crap into the mix. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm gonna let you have the pictures. Oops, you get the draft. Here's some other examples.
Thanks, Doc.
Okay, we are now at our consent agenda, and there are a couple special board meeting minutes on there, our bill list, and the personnel report. There's also a designated youth options coordinator. I would like to move the designated youth options coordinator down to under the superintendent's report, just because there wasn't any background information on that at the time. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Yes.
I'm just wondering if the issue that we got the email about with the teacher contract is in that personnel report, or is that something we're gonna talk about? Was the teacher contract given at the wrong amount?
It's in the personnel report.
It's in that report
Yes.
that
This
we're,
report, yes.
I'd like to pull that off to talk about that.
Okay, sure. Anything else out of there anyone would like? Okay, so we are going to also move the personnel report to underneath the superintendent's report. So that would leave our special board minutes from 8/22/95 and our bill list 8/1 to 8/31. Do I have a motion and a second to approve those?
Promotion.
Second.
Motion and a second by Biff. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay, so under the report of the superintendent, we'll go ahead and do them in order. So the first was the personnel report. Biff, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, my question had to do with a English teacher was given a contract at the wrong amount of money.
Sure. You want me to take it and run with it?
Yeah.
Let me just take it and run with it. So, when I made an offer of employment to this gentleman, I made the offer of employment for like $51,086. And he accepted the offer of employment. When we sent out the email summary, it had $51,086 on it. Then we made an error. And when it came before the board, it was at 62,000 something. And his contract was submitted, given to him at 62,000. So then he called the payroll office and said, why is my paycheck less than what it should be? So that's when I got involved. So to make the next step, I contacted legal counsel, talked to Jim Macy and said, what are our options? He said, you can do a contract correction. So on the agenda is a contract correction for the original amount that I offered him, that he accepted, and that was in his email summary of $51,086 or.
It says 68 here.
Yeah.
It says what?
It says 68, not 86.
51,068, whatever, don't mind.
51,006.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you, Terry.
You don't
51,006.
want to make more errors.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, so Jim Macy said you do a contract correction. So that's what you'll see there. So then I had contacted him verbally, but then I followed up after this with a written email indicating everything that I just shared with you, indicating that we had contacted legal counsel, that we were doing a contract correction, and that it would be coming to the board tonight. In addition, I said that for the first 12 days that he was under the contract for the larger amount, we would honor that for those 12 days. But if this passes tonight, starting tomorrow, his contract is 51,068, sorry about that.
68, yeah.
68, and then starting tomorrow for the rest of the year, obviously, that's what his pay will reflect. Does that make sense?
Sure, what did he sign? What did it say on the contract that he signed?
The 62,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the error was, the offer of employment was correct. The email summary that we sent him was correct. And when it came to the board, there was an error. So the personnel report was approved at the incorrect amount, the higher amount. The contract was issued at the higher amount. And when I became involved, like I said, I sought out Jim Macy for what are our legal options. He said, you do a contract correction, and that's where we are tonight.
So if we do the contract correction and from this point on pay him less money, how does he still have a contract? He signed a piece of paper saying, I get $60,000. If we change that, we don't have his signature on a contract saying this is what you're making. I mean, how could he still have a contract if we're changing it? I'm not saying this is.
Right, we could issue him a new contract is what I believe we would end up doing. But according to Jim Macy, the contract's an at-will contract, which means we can make changes to it if we have to. I'm going with the legal counsel's advice. I'm going with what the, said I should do.
Man, I understand what you're saying. I have a bigger concern that the contract was wrong in the way it was printed and given to the teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a contract, and my hope would be those things are doubled and triple checked before we hand it to somebody. My other concern is we are saying, here's a contract, and I hope this gentleman, lady understands it was a mistake and will sign a new contract.
Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, it sounds
Well,
like.
I don't know. It
got an
depends.
email.
Has anybody talked to them? Has anybody talked to them face to face? Or has it just been
Original
emailed
agreement.
over the phone?
No, I talked to him over the phone,
Right.
and then I sent him an email with everything that was laid out.
Right.
Yeah, so this doesn't sound like that big of a deal to me. It sounds like
It's
just
a pretty big deal.
sounds like a clerical error was made.
It's a big deal when you get an email about
Oh,
it.
really? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it kind of worked out in this person's favor, right? I mean, they got paid a little bit more than they accepted and agreed to.
For 12
So,
days.
I mean, to me, this
Come on.
really seems like it's not that big of a deal and it's getting remedied, right?
So what contract law course did you take? I mean, honestly, you can't just sort of
Well, if you have
turn
a
around and say,
verbal
oh
offer,
gee,
and if you have something in writing that you
secretary
accepted."
screwed up and, put the wrong digit in. I mean, if he's got a signed contract, he's got a signed contract, right?
Well, I just want to point out that Jim Macy said, if he would have said he's got a contract, he's got a contract, absolutely, we'd have to live by that and honor that. When Jim Macy said you do
Yeah.
a contract correction, and Jim Macy basically said it's an at-will contract, you can do this, then it's like, we made an error, let's correct the error.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
I get that.
In my place, if I ended up getting paid more for a different job, even if it went a couple months, and they caught that, they'd come back to me, and I'd actually probably end up having to pay that back as well, too. So, I mean, the fact that we're gonna honor that for those 12 days is pretty nice.
Joe?
Mike's conferred on this to me when that was identified. And then what's really important to understand was this individual knew what he was offered and he accepted that verbal offer. There was a mistake in the confirmation of that with the written contract. We had done legal in terms of Mike and I talked about, we, try not to pay him any, no, he said, no, it's there until we correct it. And so we paid him, so he's got a little bit more. But he knew, and I'm honestly surprised, that he recognized
Surprised with what? Honestly surprised.
surprised because there was a clear understanding between the personnel department and him, what the offer was and what he was accepting by the email confirmation of that.
No, okay.
And I think to take that further, I'll take full responsibility in terms of anything that's missed, that rests with me, in terms of procedures and processes. But this, I believe, was an information that was clearly understood. Somebody maybe thought that there was an opportunity here to get a little bit more, which raises other issues. But right now, we made an error, we corrected the error, and we sought legal advice in terms of how we were correcting it.
I think being it done in good faith and you have evidence that the contract was already agreed upon at a certain price, that's why Jim Macy is saying this is a contract correction. So we have evidence of a correction being made. I see that being in good faith that there was a mistake and now it's being remedied. Thank you for paying them extra. That makes perfect sense. I don't think you're obligated to do that, but I think that that's in the purview of the mistake. And being in a contract correction, and there's evidence of the correction because of the previous offers through email and verbal communication, I would agree with the lawyer's assessment saying that it's a correction. It's not a full out trying to, pay him less than what he's obligated to. Thank you.
But there are left-handed and right-handed lawyers, I mean, you can almost say, I mean, if he said, well, I think I want to contest this, I bet he'd find a lawyer that would represent him. But if you can settle it on a personal and, civil basis, I suppose that's okay. I mean, but I think it is kind of a big deal. And I'm kind of like with Biff on this, that proofreading is probably a pretty good idea on this sort of stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to beat up on you, but I do think that it's like.
They're making a bigger deal.
Do we have a corrective action plan to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
What actually happened was, like, you look at the personnel report tonight and you look at professional staff on here. And then what HR does is come in and puts the new professional staff to be recommended for the next board meeting. We actually put them in there. Well, everything got put in correctly. However, the salary of the person that was in there the previous 2 weeks was left in there. And that's how the error happened. That's how the error happened. See, so and I apologize for that. Sorry it happened. But we're only human, and a human error.
I mean,
Again, I would accept that responsibility on my shoulders, in terms of understanding that we've consulted with legal in terms of how to remedy this, and so we have an action plan. And I would just ask you to consider the action on the item.
I make a motion to accept the personnel report.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the other one is, and Lee, if you could talk about this, the designated youth options coordinator for us, please.
Sure. So annually, the board chooses, superintendent or their designee, in this case, a designee, to approve the early college programming. The law states that it has to be a board-approved person designated to do that. In the past years, it's always been the principal at Lincoln High School. I got to serve as this person for 6 years, and now it's Mr. Hoffman's turn.
Thank you. So I would need a motion in a second to approve Micah Hoffman as our youth options coordinator.
So,
All right. A double movement here.
almost.
Biff and then Chris.
Make me too.
Chris and then Biff. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, and then our district activity update.
I think just a couple of things to identify. First of all, I would encourage you to start checking websites like Lincoln High School. There's some sporting events, some of the extracurricular like music, and that won't happen until later on where that starts getting into the schedule. But there are athletic events already going on. We've had about 3 football games, so far. So really strongly to encourage you to attend events and stuff like this, and we'll continue to populate that. I did share with you last night, there was an airing of an interview. One of our past employees had some concerns over Success for All, and so approached the radio station, and the radio station, or the TV station, wanted to have input from us too. And so that was aired, and I shared that with you. I thought we did a nice job. They interviewed us for almost 45 minutes. They only take out about a minute and a half, in total. So you've seen what's in there, but, it was, I'm saying this in part because I couldn't believe how the mastery that Angela Shard has, who was interviewed as one of our SFA facilitators and who was on the original reading curriculum committee. And it was just really nice, to see that level of engagement. And, I think this information is good in terms of when it gets out to the public. I think everybody means to do well, but it provided another opportunity, and I think we did well on that. The other one on Be My Guest, yeah, you're sometimes, asked, and sometimes, I can anticipate some questions coming in. And one of the questions, was in fact in terms of, are we not offering free lunches? I said, no, we are offering lunches to those who are eligible for that, just like we did in the past. There's not a stigma in terms of how we provide that. Personally, having been on a family who use food stamps a lot, I understand all that. I just would like to clarify, to the extent that you also have taxpayers listening and others, who are wondering, when you take need that isn't needed, you're hurting somebody else. So I think it was providing some context for people to also know that not only are we taking care of kids who need it, we're also taking care of our taxpayers by being good fiscal stewards too. So just a little clarification there. So that's my activities report.
Okay, thank you. There's no unfinished business. And
Can I ask
then-
just one question on the food situation?
Sure, yeah.
Jim, when an account doesn't have money and they give the kid a sandwich, is there a procedure where the family knows that they're going short on funds? I mean, do they let them know a couple weeks in
Angela would be able
advance?
to address that, Beth, in terms of what our procedures are here. I'm not as familiar with them as Angela is.
There are just automated messages that come out through Infinite Campus, that are generated automatically. I believe they start when an account gets to be $10 or below. And that was standard before we went, before the pandemic and everything, so we've essentially turned those back on.
And I share some of this too, because there's a lot of projections out there that we're at a fiscal cliff, because of the money that has been given out before, and all of a sudden all that's drying up, and people are cutting budgets. So I think being good fiscal stewards is really important here, in terms of as we're proceeding. But truly recognizing in terms of the importance of making sure that we are providing, for those, who might need a little bit extra in those ways, that is just helpful, and nobody really is recognizing that.
Right, yeah, and I actually was just looking, I got a little food service balance message, so they do send that to you, and then you can do it right on there. But I guess the first week of school was provided by Chartwell, right?
Well, that's our
There was some misinformation that went out from the schools. Their accounts were all charged for meals, but we didn't do the substitute meal for the first week. So that, we have to make a choice whether, and we can change that at any time if we wanted. The district essentially has to pay for the alternate meal that's given out when there's no food or no money in the account. Okay, so we provided regular meals through the first week because of the transition.
So for the first week, the regular meals were, I'm wanting to know this for myself too, because her balance went down. If it was provided for, then she was buying other stuff.
So, yeah, there was, through one school specifically, that it was messaged out that they paid for it, or I mean, if they say Chartwell's pays for it, it's a district pays for it.
Right.
Like all our profits and all of our expenditures are through Chartwell's. That's are through that contract.
There is, and I don't have the depth of understanding here, but just a little bit more, and Angela could help in. Just another thing that's happened is we recognize that there's a lot of waste of food. A lot of food is being provided and thrown away, but we also recognize that this food can be provided to other places. And so we are, looking in terms of if there's a possibility where we can pass that stuff on. We will make arrangements for that. So again, we're looking in terms of making sure that we recognize the value of anything to the extent that that could be used. We are attempting to do that instead of just a loss of money and good food.
Correct. Yeah, I had also heard that, and people were inquiring about that because I know that they require them to take a fruit, but then at the end, then the garbage is filled with all the fruit that they didn't eat. So if that's the case, you know, if that's already paid for, then that would be a good thing to be able to take and then donate to, you know, home shelter, Paul's Pantry, whatever it may be. So that's not being wasted.
Is there an easy way when we have kids like this that, and there's probably many reasons why an account doesn't have money at different times, but I'm just wondering, and I'm looking at the experienced people who ran schools over there, that I serve on the Peter Pantry board, and we have a woman who goes in and tries to get names of kids to get food baskets for. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to somehow take kids who may need it, who may be hungry, and at least get it to our counselors, that, you know, there are these options within the community to help out. I don't think that's a big deal, but maybe we could help out that way and help families have places to go if things get tough.
When we have families in need, we really need them to fill out a free and reduced lunch application, you know, because if they are truly in need, and then the hard part is there's always people that fit into the gray area, you know, but they're, you know, everyone is encouraged to fill out that application. And that application also assists us with just funding that we get for title as well. I mean, there's other pieces, and our former food service director had noted when we were looking at some of the data in evaluating if we would go for CEP again or not, the fact that the number of applications that have come in are way, way lower while our free and reduced percentages have gone up. So that's gonna negatively impact some of the funding we receive. So in part of making this transition, we've really, really driven home and through the communications to family to fill out that free and reduced application. So it's a hard transition. We would not want anyone to go unfed, and there's very careful procedures put in place to make sure you're not marked a certain way, you know, like by being free and reduced lunch. So we just really encourage families to take the steps to fill out those applications.
So on that note, is that, when they fill out those forms, is that a discrete process, it sounds like, where?
Yes.
So it's not obvious to like the other students, like if there's kids in that program?
Yeah, no, they all got their card, whether it's pre-reduced or full pay or whatever, it's just a card. Same thing.
And they fill it out on Infinite Campus right now. Because we don't have a formal registration process, they have to fill it out separately or get a paper application to fill out. And then when they if they qualify for free reduced meals, after that point, they also can have other fees waived for items like band and orchestra instrument rental. And then also like participating in sports and just the athletics. So it doesn't waive like a yearbook fee, you know, if you want, that's an elective item.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to make that process as painless as possible and as discreet as possible. The last thing I want, or I think I speak for others, but I won't say that. No one wants kids to go hungry, right? And to not be able to focus while they're in school. But I think to Jim's point, you know, we can't just say, hey, here's a free lunch forever, right? And just give it to everyone. I don't think that's the answer. So I think we gotta find something in the middle that is gonna satisfy the need without overextending and burdening taxpayers more than they already are.
I'll speak.
Chris, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that, and I just want to recognize the outstanding and the compassionate work that is done every day by the office staffs in every building in this district. Because I guarantee you that every time a parent comes in at the beginning of the year, every form that is a way for them to get assistance, people are asked, do they need to fill it out? There are clipboards, there are pens, there are forms, everything's ready to go, no matter how busy it is in those offices. And I've been there and I've seen it. They make the time to check with people to make sure people are getting the support and the help that's available to them. And I just want to recognize all those people in that hard and thoughtful work that they do.
Thanks, Chris.
To piggyback off of your idea, we have a mechanism in place that does work, and you just complimented them. And there actually is letters sent home to their addresses saying that they qualify for free and reduced lunch. So it's very discreet, just so everybody's aware. And I know we're trying to make a big deal out of this, which it can be. However, I do want to say, your point, Tony, you said that you can't just give free lunches out either. Well, we did do that. And I would ask Mr. Tennis, because you were the principal, Lincoln, because I got reports saying that there was a lot of wasteful people taking extra lunches and they were throwing them in the garbage from staff. This is last year and the year before. So there is abuse on both sides of it. So what I'm saying is that, yes, we want to make sure everybody's taken care of, which we all articulated very PC'ly to be correct. At the same time, we need to be mindful that we're not wasting food. And we're not just giving everybody entitlements, because that's what it happens. So I'm completely understanding of what Jenny says. I completely understand what you say, and I completely understand where I came from. But there is a reality of when we give people free stuff too long, they become dependent on it as well. So let's just understand that, you know, there is a mechanism, and there are people that are working very good at that right now. And if there is a problem, please continue to bring it up to the board or to the district supervisor so that we can remedy it. But I don't know what the problem is right now.
Well, and what I would ask is that, you know, if there is, you know, because I know too that there's a process, as well as Biff said too, about, you know, counselors and others, teachers in the building recognizing when a student might be in need and to get them those extra resources. So I would just ask that, you know, if any of the board members feel like you don't know what the process is at our school, you know, just reach out. And we can let you know, because I'm, you know, almost positive it goes way beyond food, right? To get other services and things that are needed out in the community. Because we have all those relationships and connections with a lot of the service organizations in the community, be able to provide that, be it clothing, be it lots of different things. So, you know, I'm confident as well that we are doing that in our district. But you know, reach out and if, because I think it might be an educational thing for us that we may not know. Yeah.
I really appreciate this discussion. Because I find myself sometimes, you know, and it's showed up here a few times, where something is happening and I hear it very indirectly, and then I get an email and somebody wants me to explain why that's happening, which I didn't know was happening. And I have no details, I have no knowledge. I mean, a lot of stuff on this one has been, you know, being helpfully provided to people that don't know shit like me. And yet have a kind of a responsibility to respond to citizens who email me or call me on the phone. So I guess we can't catch everything, but I think this is a really benefit.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed, you know, that I've noticed since being on here or on the board is a lot of times I find that myself, I even react to something, but I don't even know what we're doing first.
Yeah, right.
Right, so I think that, you know, when those things come up, I've found myself going, okay, well, why don't I step back for a second and find out what do we do in this situation, you know, and reach out to the people that have those answers. And then, you know, if it's confusing to me or I have a different idea or we think we need to do something different, you know, by all means, let's bring it here and figure out what we can do. But yeah, I think that, you know, one thing that, you know, I've heard us all say around this table, I mean, we really do, we have a lot of opportunities. We offer a lot of things to our kids. I mean, Lee's taught me that over and over. And it's about making those connections with people to get those. So, but, you know, if you ever are questioning, it seems sort of scratching your head about, well, why wouldn't we do this? You know, just reach out to people, you know, in that have those answers. Yep.
Angela or Jim, do we have any mechanism? I've heard anecdotally from members in the community that there may be some parents that for whatever reason just don't fill out the forms or just aren't responsive. Is there any mechanism for kids, you know, maybe there's a language barrier or whatever the case may be, right? They're just not filling the forms out. Do we have a mechanism to ensure that those kids get help? Or would that be the guidance counselors then, or how would?
This is probably pretty complex regarding the support network that's in place, because I think there's varied people that will get involved, into this to provide, as much of an assurance, in terms of that everybody's taken care of that needs to be. It's difficult in terms of how far do you go in, for a particular case that could get missed. But right now, I think we've got good measures in place, to do that screening, to assess.
Yeah, and I would say, again, the school that you are over, I would go and ask them what they do. Because I can guarantee you that even with the language barrier, there are people in the school that are acknowledging that, noticing that there's an issue, and then reaching out. So it's happening. Is it perfect and we never miss anybody? Probably not, but the resources are there. And you guys have all worked in the school. It is immense of what we try to do when we notice something. So I think one of the things that might help is go to your school and just say, hey, what do you guys do in a situation like this? And I think you'd be pleasantly surprised to hear, the lengths that we go, to help these students out as much as we can.
I think we have the support system. I think all of that stuff is great and in place, but I think a lot of times when people fall through the cracks is maybe not me per se, because I'm managing, but there's a lot of people out there that don't qualify for that free and reduced, and I'd be one of them. And I can't tell you, there's been plenty of times where I've been like, Layla, try not to buy so many, things, I would wait till next week and I'll put some more money in an account, whatever it may be. There's gotta be other families out there like me, and maybe even less fortunate, that are just struggling because now we gotta pay for that as well too. It's just another bill on top of everything else that's piling up, and this is the time in the economy that it hit us the hardest. That's one of the reasons why I voted against going for this, but, hey, that's what we gotta do.
And anyone that qualifies for food share benefits, just through the state, we get their qualification for free and reduced lunch, or for free lunches through a direct cert process. And Pam Kretsch, in the food service office, runs that daily at this time of the year. So there are certain layers. It's not like every single person has to apply, but if you do not qualify for that direct cert, then you have to do an application. So, and we've sent out a ton of messaging regarding that as well. And we can push out another communication as well.
Well, I appreciate everyone's heart on this, because I think it's important. And, again, if any other questions come up, please reach out to our staff about that.
Just a couple things back in terms of that return. When the federal government or state is intending to help, sometimes they haven't taken care of issues that are also priorities. We have an unfunded mandate with special education. Our special needs students really need a lot of that resource, and the state and the federal government can't find a way to meet that demand, and yet they keep offering service and extending out. So that's why it's important that we're all part of that. The second thing, and I think Stacy was just referencing it, please don't try to problem solve when you can call an administrator, call me, call anybody. We will follow up, we'll get back with you as well as the individual. Because Stacy just brought something to my attention, almost immediately. I had already been researching it. It was a fairly new thing, but we were able to make sure that we're working together here so that we don't make it harder on anybody to serve our parents.
My last comment is actually for Matthew Spalding, but it's pretty much saying that what happens, we don't want to take away from the individual responsibility of the students either, because what ends up happening, which I know a firsthand example of, is a student wants to be, cool with their friends. So you put $300 on their account, but then your daughter or my son buys everybody, sodas or Cheetos, or so then $300 turns into $3 really quick. Yeah. And you're like, well, honey, you don't drink 10, 12 sodas a time. And you're like, but my friends really wanted to be cool, and I wanted to be cool for them. So that happens a lot, and that's where we can't be trying to fix everything for everybody else. That's that personal responsibility that comes with coming of age. And we can't just try to problem solve everything for every student and their parents. This is what growing is. And so I think that we can't just try to micromanage everything, saying that we're going to fix everything for everybody. That's coming of age, and that's how students develop and learn. to understand their personal responsibility of managing their money. And if we just keep on putting money in the account and they mismanage it, what's gonna happen when they buy a house or a car, or other things?
So will you help Matt with that then later?
Sure.
Okay, let's move on to our policy review. We have a first reading, policy 5111. This was the eligibility of resident, non-resident students. And I'm just gonna, to make this easier, I'm just gonna kind of go around the room and see if this, to make it a little easier. Chris, was there anything on this document that you wanted to discuss or change at all?
No, I have one generic request.
Yes.
And that is the last time we had a policy review, we delightfully received a red line master, which shows
Talked
us
about that at the last meeting.
really,
Yeah, we did.
really helps me frame it.
Right, we talked about this last time. Here's the problem. The problem is that these, where we're at, the ones that we have currently now and the ones that we're getting
Are two separate.
may have been another revision.
Okay, all right.
And so what we talked about last time was taking these as if they were brand new.
Okay.
And saying, because otherwise we would have to redline
So
two
look
or
at it
three
as new
different.
rather than, could be red line and something that doesn't make sense.
Sure, right.
To
Correct.
another one that
Yeah.
hopefully will make sense.
So we
Okay.
all agreed that
Okay.
the red line would be great. But what we decided to do is we're gonna look at these as if this is our first one almost. And is this what we want, or we feel like we're missing something?
Sure.
Right.
Okay. No, otherwise nothing.
Okay, anything on 51?
This is the busing one, right?
This is
This is what?
This is
5113.
not the busing one yet. No.
5111.
This is
I'm not sorry.
5111.
Okay, then I'm good on this.
You're good on this one? Okay. My only one was on letter D. What I wondered about letter D was, it says upon request of a student's parent or the request of an adult student, students have gained a 12th grade status and who are no longer reside within the district shall be permitted to complete their high school education tuition free. My question on this was, is there an age limit? Or should there be an age limit, or can anybody?
Yeah.
Legally, it's 21, right?
Everybody can.
Yeah, state law is to 20. Law is 21, so there is.
Okay, so even though it says adult student, that was still just
18, 19, 20.
implied to 21?
Yeah.
So just as an example, as a practice at Lincoln High School, if there was someone who, let's say, would have been a 19-year-old, fifth-year senior.
Yeah.
What we do is, we have really another program for that.
Sure.
We wouldn't really enroll them as a full-time student in the school per se and have them, come and interact necessarily. We would have them finish up over the summer, or there are other options for them to go on perhaps in like an HSED type.
Sure.
Or whatever, but yeah, we would typically as a practice
So
we're not having a 21-year-old come to school.
Okay, so, and a 21-year-old, or let's even go a little further into the statute, if they're 22, 23, can they come and lobby and say, hey, I was at my 12th grade and can I just come in and do it underneath here without having an age?
Yeah, we would deny that.
Okay.
He
All
wants
right.
to make Billy Madison.
Right. Okay, that was my only question about that one. Matthew Spalding, anything on 5111?
Nope.
Tony? Good. Okay,
No, I'm fine.
okay. Matthew? Okay. All right, so we have the first read done on that one, and we'll see it next time for a second read. The next one is 5113. This is the open enrollment program, inter-district, and this is this one is the one that had the bus one. So I will start with Chris again. Anything?
I'm good.
Biff?
Just wondering if we came up with a sentence or idea to help that
Isn't it a memo?
situation we talked about with, I think it was Valders last
It's
time.
a memo.
Oh,
There
yeah,
was a
the
memo.
memo.
sent
So
out.
on the memo that accompanies these, the other option that we created to sort of match what I think the board request was, is written in the memo, and it reads, The board delegates to the district administrator the authority to determine whether or not a neighboring district can bus resident students within our boundaries for attendance in our resident neighboring district.
Good.
Oh, okay, that's good.
So if you'd like to make that, you just can amend that into a policy, because it's not one of the chosen options, so we would have to put that in and.
So I would, let's hang on to that 1 second and then we'll go around and then, we'll address that, okay?
I have nothing for that 113.
The only thing I wanted to ask about, and this is sort of more of a procedural on what we do, is, I know in January we talk about special ed. What do I want to say? It's the space, right, when we're out of space. Do we also do that, or are we supposed to do that, I guess, for regular ed as well? Because I don't know that I've ever seen that, but in the policy, it says during a January meeting, the board shall establish ability space by turning the number of regular education and special ed spaces. So I'm just wondering if we should do that on a regular basis, no matter what.
We do.
We do.
So for example, if I were the principal of Lincoln High School, and there was a student enrolling from, let's say, Two Rivers, I would get a phone call or the Amber in the business office would be saying, basically, the question is do you have room for this student?
Got it.
Yeah. So we do
We
that.
not set limits for general ed, we just set them officially for special ed,
Yeah.
but we always do go through that process.
What do you think that when it says the board shall establish the availability? Like, are we doing something at that point, or?
So while we always talk to the principals, the board does not establish, you only establish for the special education. In some districts where they are bursting at the seams, where they have, a problem we would love to have, where we
Right.
have tons of open enrollment in, districts will set limits so that they can sort of manage the massive requests.
Okay. Do you think that needs, I guess I'm asking everyone here, do you think that needs to be changed since we're not doing that, or leave it in there in the case that we would ever have to do it? Just leave it in there. Okay. Okay. Matthew Spalding.
Oh, I had nothing, but he was about to talk.
Oh, did you want to ask something, Lawyer?
Just a procedural thing, could we separately see how it says in board book, it says first reading and policy revisions? Is there a way we can say where the second reading is? Because I don't see that. Maybe I'm not seeing it.
It won't be here till next time.
I'm talking about the ones we
Next
did
meeting.
at the special meeting.
We didn't do those were intros.
These were just introduced.
I think he just introduced
Those were the ones that were introduced, so we're gonna.
Nothing is,
I wanted to get policy done sooner so we keep moving forward.
Yeah.
So I thought we were already on the second.
Yeah, they
reading.
introduce them, then we have a first reading, then we have a second reading, then we have.
Yeah.
But now they'll be stacked up, so you'll be getting something done at
Correct.
the end of the next meeting, you'll have accomplished something, and then you'll accomplish something every meeting. Yep.
So I just wanted to see a second reading and then it would be the policies that are under the second reading, which
yeah,
will be
and
next week.
next
Yeah.
time.
Next time.
Yep. Tony, did you have anything on that policy?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Matthew's, yes. Okay, so then, I would ask that, I know the only other thing was, and I asked Lee about this, but does anyone, I asked him about the pros and the cons of a waiting list, and again, I know we're not there yet, we'd hope to be someday, and we did not check that option. Is there anybody that feels, I'm just sort of middle of the road, do you think that we should have the option of a waiting list, or just not do that at this time and wait till?
You can always address it if it comes up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
All right, so then the only thing would be is, that we would add in that, option, under the language, the board delegates to the district administration for authority to determine whether or not a negotiating district, the one that was, in the memo. So we would add that, to amend the policy. So is that okay with everybody? And then at the second reading, that will be in there, and before we vote on it finally. Okay, perfect. Okay, and then, this would be 113.01.
Do we need to make a motion for that? Or can I just?
I think.
I don't think you have to do it for the first reading. I think it'll be in there, and then the final one, we'll just vote on the final one if there are any changes that need to be made. Chris, anything on 5113.01? Just part-time open enrollment. No. Biff?
Nothing.
I have nothing as well. No. Tony?
Nope.
Carrie? Okay. All right, and then we have 5200.01. This was our full-time student. Anything, Chris? Biff?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm good. Anybody?
I'm good.
No, Tony? No? That's it? All right, so that ends our first read of all those policies, so we'll go for a second read next time. And then we do have the new ones that are going to be introduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be introducing 4 new policies so that the next time these will enter into the first reading. And Heidi, if you could do the first 2, and then Katie will do the second 2.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first one is 2260.02, and that's services for bilingual students / English learners. And this is really meeting expectations that we have to do for the government and for the DPI. So we have English language program here. We don't have the bilingual program. And then they're asking really for us to say who's going to be responsible. And when we went through this, we looked at the district was the language that we had used in the past on these forms, where we added this first section. And then also just kind of saying who is going to be responsible at central office for, and it will be the EL coordinator that will be reporting assessments to the DPI, making sure that we're following all the processes for students when they come in and they're screened. So this is really about all of the processes that we're following to ensure we're providing adequate services to our EL students.
Okay, and the next one, Heidi?
2261 is our Title I services. This is very similar. Our Title I services are provided, actually we have opportunities across the district in Title I. And again, we didn't change anything and there's nothing to mark on this. This is very, very much what we've had in the past.
Excellent. Okay, Katie.
The first policy that I'd like to overview is our programs for students with disabilities, policy number 2460. This policy just ensures that our district is compatible with federal and state law. We're ensuring free and appropriate education for students with disabilities from age 3 to 21. It just requires or recommends through this policy that we adopt a handbook annually. It's not necessarily a handbook, but it's a recommendation that we adopt the state procedures, any sort of forms, updates for documentation and IEPs, any sort of updates legally at the state level or any federal level, that we would bring forth those procedures from the state of Wisconsin to adopt as a board. And that could be something that we could do at the January meeting when we're establishing our spaces for special education. But that would be the recommendation for this initial program. The only thing that would be different from our original, our policy that's currently in place. And the second policy is the use of physical seclusion and physical restraint with students. So this is another annual report that's required. This typically occurs in August, if you remember. This again is in compliance with state and federal law. So it's very, this is a very legal policy in nature. If you notice on the second page, there's a recommendation that just says we will be following what the state requires as far as what is included in our written notification to families in the event that their student would be a participant in any use of seclusion or physical restraint.
Excellent. So, those are in board book. So we will do a first reading of those. So we'll just kind of follow the same procedure of going through those next time around the table and see if there are any changes. And then we'll also have those available. Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, we're following Neola, it's kind of giving us templates in terms of choices to follow. That doesn't stop you from adding your own language. But when we start doing that, we just have to know that we're responsible for it. They aren't going to give us a prompt necessarily. So that will be important when we go back through the second cycle, when we've already gone through all and bring ourselves current. We will have those flagged to say, this one went off template. We added more, just so that we will know carefully to compare what we added before, because it would reflect a conversation that you had that was different than what Neola was proposing.
Perfect. All right, so let's move on to our preliminary budget.
Ask Mike Clark, joining us this evening, if you want to come on up. Or do you want to? Okay.
Mike, you consider it here.
No, Olson.
So yes, we have the draft of the preliminary budget to share with you this evening. It was included in board book. And, there's a lot of information. I included the detail, not as I put that as optional, because some people like to see the detail of it and want to see all of that. But of course, that's way more information than most of you really want and are able to digest for information. There are still quite a few factors in balance that we need to understand. The count takes place this Friday. We have final aid certification. And so those things really are large factors that still will impact our budget and our tax levy for the district. So in general, for the revenue budget for all the funds, it increased 2.7% for this year, up to $92 million. And then for the expenditures, there was a 4.6% change. Keep in mind, this is all funds. So while it'd be like, wow, that's a little bit of a difference, there's Fund 50, food service fund in there. There are some implications with that. So just to keep that in mind, this is all basically the total operations of the Manitowoc Public School District. So one of the largest, impacts this year is with the biennium budget. We are a low revenue ceiling district, so we go up to 11,000 per student. And the next year and years after, hundreds of years, be in fruition, 325 per year. So, but the major shift for us is that, we used a significant amount of our ESSER funding last year to balance the budget, and then that is not available anymore as it is one-time revenue. We still have some of it left for this budget that we're using, approximately $800,000. And then we have just the shift with the operational referendum funds coming into play. In addition, with the state budget as a whole, there was also increased expense for vouchers. So, all variables in the balance, that made expenditures come up compared to the revenue or the referendum projections come up a little bit more in some cases. Overall, I was able to share, even though some of these factors are coming in higher, the items that we have just within our general expenditures are lower and within what we requested for the referendum. So that's just an important note to keep in mind. I'm going to skip down a little bit and we're going to come back to the revenue limit portions after that. But just for the Fund 10 budget, that is increasing the 2.7% overall, and the expenditures 3.6%. So the total revenues and expenditures are $74 million as proposed in the draft budget. There is a deficit budgeted for, and for two reasons. We have common school funds that are left that we need to take care of, and so since we've already received that funding, we need to take care of that through pulling that out of fund balance. So that's why you would have a deficit budget. Also, we've received funds for the Get Kids Ahead program, and that is to support families, students with mental health programming. And that we've received those funds, but we've not put them into action. So that I've reflected in the deficit. So those two parts, that's why there's a deficit proposed for our budget for those two items. So as I mentioned already, with federal revenues and falling off and being greatly reduced, that does, overall, it increases what we need to bring in for our local tax levy. I did include some information about the comparisons side by side, and I'm happy to answer questions for that. just with the Fund 20, I'm gonna move on to Fund 27 budget and just give a little bit of a snippet of information on each of the funds. Special Education Fund is increased a little bit more. We are required to always balance Fund 27, which is our special education fund, with general Fund 10 funds. So, you know, there are always many factors that go into this, you know. There was an increase in the transfer for special education, and like the main areas that we saw an increase were in the special education fund were mainly for staffing and benefits, and you know, there's always going to be there's heavy amounts of transportation for special education, so that is also an impact in the fund. In the transfer, it talks about that. So this year, where our transfer was $7.9 million, it is projected to be up to 9.7 this year. So that is why that increase exists at that level. Fund 21, that's our special projects funds. That's mainly our fundraisers. Okay, so I'll have that as I can present in the full final budget, but that's really not something that impacts our levy and our general expenditures as a district. It's all, usually what I revenue for that is the interest that we know we'll earn, and the expenditures are all based on the activity that the groups that run those accounts decide. For Fund 38, this is great news. We have paid off all of our debts as a school district. So we are debt-free. It's actually kind of uncommon for a school district, but you know, removing this part from our budget allowed us to lessen the amount that we needed to like increase our levy, for example, because we're able to use that $1 million that we would use as a payment annually to offset increased expenses. So that is one of the major things. So I included Fund 38 for that reason, but really we won't be paying anything for debt service this year because we are debt free. I have a little more note for Fund 46, Long-Term Capital Improvements Trust. There a little bit of an increase in revenues there because through the referendum, we have a planned transfer moving forward. So overall in the Fund 10 budget and with this transfer to Fund 46, we put several things into motion to just strategically plan for our budget, increased amount for curriculum and instruction, technology devices, capital improvements for technology, and buildings and grounds. So every year, we are moving $400,000 into Fund 46 for a reserve for when we have our larger improvements that we need to make for technology. So as an example, we're making a transfer over there this year for $400,000. We already have a quote that to update our phone systems is going to cost $380,000 next year. So, you know, there's always large major updates, and strategically positioning ourselves and planning ahead through these approaches help us continue operations and continue making just general improvements in the district without cutting a lot from one area in order to make a major improvement. With the expenditures noted for Fund 46, I had listed 4 major projects. So wired and wireless capital technology upgrades are already in process with funds that are with money that's in that fund. We currently have about $2.5 million in that fund, and those purchases were already planned. Other identified needs, the Jefferson Playground Project, which is also done, is being paid for out of Fund 46. The JFK Indoor Track Replacement, that is another need that's been identified. And then critical elevator upgrades at Lincoln, Washington, and Wilson, I am suggesting that we use Fund 46 funds for. Initially, the elevator upgrades were put into the general Fund 10, and what we're thinking too is just making, you know, we can pay for those out of Fund 46 or 10.
Did that playground really cost $579,000? Or am I hallucinating?
Yes. Originally, the estimates were in the $300,000 range. I'm not sure right now where the projects come in according to budget. I don't know if I think it's coming under budget, but I don't have that right here in front of me right now, but.
I don't know, I'm remembering a lot smaller number from last year.
Well, remember, we kind of prolonged it and we were hoping to get some different quotes and then it ended up just going up, so we decided to jump on it.
Yeah.
That's,
579,
Yeah, I mean,
gold swing sets, or what do they got on that?
yeah. Well, part of the problem is it's a small project that nobody wanted, I guess. So they just bid it up and we needed it.
and essentially that falls back on us, because we could have jumped on it when it was a lower price.
Yeah, I mean, we, originally, the estimate was about half of this.
Yeah.
And then we put it out for bids and holy man, they blew the lid off, we thought.
Yeah.
So we postponed and said, well, let's wait until the economy kind of like picks up a bit and supply chains are better, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, right.
And put the bids out in the spring before, we put the bids out at not as appropriate a time the first time. So we thought we did everything right and it still came in higher than even the last bid. So, yeah, I was shocked by that too. But, it was one of those, man, we really needed that, especially at that school.
Angela.
And then lastly, with Fund 50, before we go back to the revenue limit information, Fund 50 food service, we have a $1 million fund balance right now currently, and we are required to work to bring that down. There are a lot of unknowns with going back to the free reduced paid format. So the budget's made on best estimates at this time. And so, there is a significant loss in revenues due to the changing the format and not going CEP, and then the expenditures are slightly more due to the additional cost that's anticipated. So, I anticipate that with Fund 50 especially, we're gonna have a lot more that, just hard to predict right now, because we don't know where that's going to sit, so. So going back to maybe I should pause for questions. I'm sorry, I just did a lot of talking, so.
It's a lot of money.
In general, with the revenue limit worksheets, that revenue limit provides our main primary source of revenue through state aid and local tax levy. And, I asked Mike to come in and work with us a little bit tonight and discuss some of the factors of what we have going on. And I'm gonna turn it over, at first, before I do that, I'll just say, like, the board had requested last time that I provide 3 scenarios, which I did do that. The goal was to be as close to, through the budgeting process, to keep in mind that $6.26 would be the equivalent to what we went to the taxpayers with. Of course, with additional expenditures, from the state that are mandated, some of that came in a little bit higher, so the budgeted amount for the tax levy right now, not taking into any other considerations, is $6.41 for the year. So we'll talk more about that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Does that mean that we're higher than we've told the public?
Slightly higher, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're kind of in a unique situation, having passed a referendum prior to the budget, and no one foresaw the low revenue limit city going up to 11,000. So it does put you in a situation where you can, you have some flexibility in terms of your levy. This goes back to the 1980s, but it's the last time districts could do that. So, but it does bring up that dilemma of, expectations of the residents and what the district's able to do. There's a couple of reasons, a couple of factors that I want to emphasize that causing it to be a little above. This amount balances the budget, but there's some expenditures, and mainly the vouchers being the biggest one that's anticipated to go up. And The other thing that's happening is, as was mentioned earlier, the revenue limit is made up of two parts, your levy and your aid. Right now, based on our estimates, because of I think the best that's available, the unique things happening in the aid formula is that there's the three tiers. I don't want to bore you, but the guarantee that was put in back in the early 90s of $1,930,000 was put in place, a guarantee in terms of valuation per student. And that was an effort to get higher value per member school districts, some state aid. The problem is that as of now, that number hasn't been adjusted. The secondary guarantees, we're projecting to actually be above that number. So it's filtering out some aid to districts that in normal years maybe not receive as much. And the pot is fixed, so if others are receiving more, others are receiving less, and that's part of your case. So in that equation of your revenue limits made up of taxes and state aid, if the state aid number goes down, your taxes go up. So that's one of the reasons why the levy, to kind of balance the budget and that final tax rate is coming a little bit higher than what was projected. Is it possible that there's some adjustments made to the aid formula to kind of adjust that? It's possible, but we haven't heard anything at this point, and we're a month away from getting aid certification. So the other thing is it's hard to estimate the aid right now because of the financial collection of financial data from school districts around the state is a struggle.
Yeah, it's not perfect. They're like, yeah.
There's a lot of districts that, they can't load their information, and so we're not dealing with as good of information as we typically would have right now. So we do anticipate that number to change. Will it go higher or lower? We don't know. So that, I think the important thing for tonight is to understand that, the district does have some levy flexibility in how you choose to do it or what your priorities are in terms of establishing the amount you ultimately levy next month is important.
So 731 is the max we can do, right?
Can you say that again?
731 is the max, right, for the mill rate? Is that?
If you were to want to use your full revenue limit authority based on all the estimates that I have in there right now, that's what the mill rate would end up being. So.
And 641 is the low end, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
it's, yeah.
And if we did 626, we couldn't do that because that just wouldn't be enough? If we did 626, right, that's
equivalent to the
that's what you guys.
Well, the board could decide to take some out of fund balance too. I mean, that is, the amount that it would take to get down to there. I don't have that number right on hand, but I mean, that's something that, that could be done to lower it further. But that's, you want to keep your fund balance. And we have a healthy fund balance right now, so you want to be very careful with taking those liberties.
I can appreciate that. I think we should, I just want to understand all the options. And it sounds to me like the lowest option we have now is still more than what we told the public back in April, right? Just if I'm hearing you right. So I gotta at least see what the option was to do what we told them we would do before we, you know what I mean? Unless you guys are saying that we can't function unless we do 641.
No, she's just saying that we would take it from somewhere else, the fund balance.
Yeah.
How much is the fund? You don't know you said.
Well, our fund balance is in the $20 million range right now in the scenarios. Let me see here. We have.
Do that. I think so.
Right now, the prior year estimate of the ending, and this is just, audit stuff is pretty much finished up, but it's not final. It's $20.6 million. And already we'd be going down to $20.3 million. We really would need to stay within the $18-19 million range in order to sustain our operations throughout the course of the year, just because you have high points and low points. As an example, right now in our fund balance, we have our bank balance is about $10 million, so we could sustain about 2 months of payments and stuff right now, but you've gotta be careful that you don't get that to be too low.
How much would we have to take out of that balance to get to the original?
That, it would be approximately, I'm trying to think here. I don't have that figure readily available.
Maybe not exactly, could you estimate?
It'd probably be about $1.5 million less, I would say, total. I can figure it out pretty quickly.
We'd still be above the 18?
Yeah, no, I open up a document, I can get that for quickly.
Oh, I don't know, but back in the old days, the university always sort of like tried to keep it down, but, you know, they would get the whole budget, you know, they'd get the whole lump sum, throw it in the bank and then live off the interest. You know, I mean, just the interest would generate, and it would make up for some of the stuff that they hadn't put in, you know, that asked for money. Interest rates are high now. Are we benefiting from that?
We are. We've made about where a year ago we were paying fees on what we were making or at the bank, like $1,000 a month. Now we made $300,000 over this year.
Okay.
So I can get this for you in a second. I'm gonna just go into here. We would be at about between $750,000 and $500,000 off of in a deficit to meet to be like $7 or $6.20, for example, if we did 700,000. So it'd be 750,000 to 500.
So how much in bucks do we have to do to meet how much in bucks do we have to like take out of this budget proposal? 7.21. In order to take it down to where Tony wants to go.
6.26, yeah.
Well, the $7.20 estimate for the mill rate was based on originally, the initial revenue or the referendum projections. But then with the equalized value increasing to 14%, that means that the new equivalent to that was $6.26.
Yeah.
So that's where the change comes in, and so it just changes the way the levy is spread out across the property value.
So if you wanted to to get to that, it's roughly, 600 plus or minus 50,000. Because keep in mind that we're using estimated valuation, estimated aid, so it could fluctuate. But again, philosophically, if that's what you want to do, you'd probably be in that 500 to 700,000.
Are we saying less than $1 million?
Yes, 700,000.
So
See the issue with that.
would it be fair, am I thinking about this the wrong way, but would it be fair to assume that if things hadn't changed with equalized value, that would we be in this, would we have enough money with that referendum to operate, or would we have to come up with another $500,750,000 to?
Well, that's challenging to answer because it would depend upon if the vouchers would have increased. The vouchers is the piece where we serve as a pass-through for the state to collect that money for private schools.
Well, the referendum would give you additional 5.2 million. The assumptions were $200 a student, and the number came in at $320, and then you got the low revenue limit, which was additional $611. So the revenue side, you would be okay based on those assumptions. If say they didn't go up to 11,000, the assumptions used in the referendum would have provided enough funds for operations. What's happening is on the levy side is that the state aid is coming in lower because we're estimating about $500,000 due to that kind of shift in those guarantees between the primary and secondary. And then also your voucher payment has gone up, which, how you consider that in terms of your operation, whether that's just the state program and that's the net result. So really,
That was an increase of 750, am I correct? 750,000.
yeah, so districts look at it differently. Some districts say we're just gonna pass along because that's the way the process works. In your case, if you wanted to balance, get back to that tax rate, you would be using fund balance to kind of make up for that. Now, the district will get more aid on that expense next year, but it is, the timing of those types of things gets a little awkward, so. But again, the referendum would have provided enough funds for operations, but it's really coming down to that levy side of the equation that things are a little bit off, resulting in a little bit higher tax rate.
Yeah, I guess, just to add to that, I just want to make sure that when we're putting budgets together and forecasting, that we're not too rosy in our assumptions or wildly off. You know, there's nothing worse than saying, hey, it's gonna be this, and then, oh, hey, by the way, I was off by like $500,000 or, and that's, you know, if I try to do that to one of my customers, they're typically not too happy with me, so try to be a little bit more, and again, maybe it was unavoidable, right? I'm not saying that.
Well, again, the reason you're sitting, the factors that are causing the issue are, no one anticipated having the additional revenue available, moving up to the 11,000. I mean, there was nobody
Thanks to 20.
had anticipated that. So the district has more levy authority granted between the combination of the state budget and the referendum.
Yeah.
But at the time you went to referendum, you had to make some assumptions. And I think 200, some people might even argue, might have been a little aggressive, but it really ended up being conservative. And then there's those expenditures, that the voucher, which again, whether you, how you want to classify that, if that's a district operational expenditure or a state program expenditure. And then the loss of state aid, which fluctuates every year, and that's hard to anticipate because when the estimates the DPI has given out aren't accurate, because some districts whose expenses weren't included. But that fluctuates every year, and that's always an unknown. So, you know, I think from a projection standpoint, the district did, from terms of its operational expenditures, did a nice job. And some of those other factors that are causing this situation.
So it's really just kind of unlucky.
I'm sorry.
Well, lucky and unlucky in some ways. Some of the state budget worked in your favor, others didn't.
Angela, did you produce this whole document, this first one?
The memo that you have, or
Just what we're going over right now?
the scenarios that you
Yep.
have? Yes. Mhm.
So, thank you, it was very good. I actually enjoyed reading it. It was very concise and clear. So, thank you for that. What I do want to kick myself about talking about now is, I want to look at this as in a positive manner, saying, hey, we do have real issues here going forward, mainly in Fund 46. So what I'm thinking is, why don't we try to instead of trying to, you know, go in the future and say, hey, let's ask for a capital improvement referendum or that kind of thing, why don't we take, you know, scenario one where we're kind of close to where we were originally at, or where you thought you would land. Really, it was a projection, it wasn't a promise, because there's so many unknowns. So I'm kind of more inclined to say scenario one, but I wouldn't be opposed to saying, hey, why don't we, you know, we are moving more money and we're trying to think forward into Fund 46. But I think we really, the biggest thing that taxpayers say, hey, if I give you more money, what are you gonna do with it? And what are you gonna positively change the community with? So I think if we can show our community, like projects like Jefferson, other things like that, or, you know, JFK, those kind of things, I think the taxpayers can understand where that money's going, especially when they go into a teacher's conference and they see an outdated building, or they go in the auditorium and they see water coming down. So I can wrap myself around, and I think our taxpayers can wrap around the idea of, hey, we need capital improvements. Let's start forecasting and budgeting to that. So I don't want to go on the deep end and say, hey, let's just, you know, let's just take it to our voters now. Let's go up to the full revenue limit of 7.3. Everybody likes to say 7.3 mil rate, but really, you know, we could use different terminology and say how much it would go up. So it would be a lot, but I don't wanna say that. I wanna say, let's start forecasting, because in one sentence, Tony, you say that, I'm not trying to get on you about it, but I'm saying like, we need to think about how we're gonna solve these problems in the future. And I think being proactive right now and being truthful and honest about it, saying, hey, this could be a way we could start to address those things, which we already are, but this is more so that, and we can move forward as a team. So that's my 2 cents about the scenarios 1, 2, and 3, and I'm very happy how it was presented. I know this is just a conversation, but it's pretty concise to me.
I was gonna ask, if we did scenario 1, how would we make the deficit of 267 up? The 267,000 in scenario
For
1?
what fund?
It's a
They
deficit.
pull it out of fund balance.
So that, yeah, it essentially, when you approve a deficit budget, you're saying that you're gonna take out of fund balance.
Okay.
And the board should always approve any use of fund balance. That is not the authority of myself to take, it's always the board's authority.
So that would be a one-time thing.
Correct. And your fund balance should be reserved for primarily one-time expenditures. So, where we earmark the JFK track as a good example, that could be a one-time use of fund balance in Fund 10 rather than Fund 46. So there are some of those things where there could be flexibility in that as well.
One other question, in 2017, 2018, we had a deficit of $1 million. Did we take out a fund balance for that?
Yeah, you automatically would have.
Okay,
Yeah, just the way the math works.
okay, just wanna make sure. Who was next?
In my personal opinion, when we first came up with this referendum, our point was to get through this, and if we didn't need to use it all, we would give it back to the community, and I fully stick with that. If we're even going with scenario 1, we are pulling out of the fund balance $200 and some thousand. In order to get back down to the 626, we'd be pulling out, up to 750 or whatever, and we'd still be above the amount in that balance in order to function and continue to go. I understand it's probably not one you'd want to do, because I'm going to guess because it's not in any of those 3 scenarios. But I would personally like to stick with my commitment in saying, we're going to take as least amount possible. And I would want to pull out of that balance to bring it down to 626.
And then Jim.
I liked what Matt said.
Stand that.
Well, no, and the reason he likes to increase taxes. But we have complained about not being able to raise what we need to take care of the district over the years. When they changed the funding formula years ago, because we were a district that didn't overspend, we got penalized. And for some reason, Madison made a change this year. I think Matt's thinking is correct in that if we show what we're going to use that money for, the community will support you. I give tours of the high school all summer long. And people love walking through that old building. But they walked into the auditorium and they saw this beautiful restored auditorium and the plaster coming off the wall because we didn't fix a roof. The windows were put in the 70s. And during snowstorms and rainstorms, if you get an east wind, the 3rd and 2nd floor classrooms get wet. So if we can show that some of that additional is being used to take care of stuff, so we don't have to come up with a referendum later on 5 years from now that says we need $100 million to fix our buildings, that might be good for our taxpayers. The cost of fixing things now is going to be less than it is in 5 years. That playground. So I think we have to look at some scenarios that say, okay, we can go with this and not increase taxes, but we're going to take out of the fund balance. And I've got to figure that fund balance out because that's a lot different than the county fund balance because we have $3 million in ours. And I'm not sure why there's such a difference between how a county runs. Yeah,
What's your total operating budget, you know?
90 some,
So you're above
yeah,
us.
it's a lot. But we also do things differently. We have debt. And I saw tonight that we don't have debt here, but the county does because they build roads and buildings and stuff. But if we can show what it's being used for and we can start getting some of these things done, we may not have to have that referendum 5 years down the road that says we need $100 million to fix our buildings. 60 million or wherever it's gonna be. So I get completely the idea of going to 626 and taking what we need out of the fund balance. But I also think it's an opportunity if we do this wisely and don't waste it, but we fix things we need to fix. You made a good point, and if taxpayers know why you're spending the money, we'll support it.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess I'd like to see some scenarios when we do this and.
What I'm really, we can't just, I mean, Angela did say that if we put in Fund 10, you can make one-time withdrawals. Now, I understand, that's great, but I would like a roadmap more so, because when it gets thrown in Fund 10, then it just becomes a continuation budget and everything just gets pulled out of there. I don't really, as a taxpayer, I don't agree with that, that's a catch-all. I mean, so that's why Fund 46, you can show that it's going to certain projects or what, but I don't like how Fund 10 is a catch-all. So that, because that's my opinion.
Jeff?
You know, again, I don't know what the net is of the assumptions that were made. Some of are working for us and some of are working against. The one that worked against us is we weren't expecting an additional $750,000 of voucher payments. And even though that money is coming, it's presented as an expense to our taxpayers. That means that $750,000 isn't being spent on us. It's just going out the door. I mean, so but again, I don't know what the net is of all those exchanges, but that in itself. But we do also know in terms of what we've been identified as need, we do know that we have the needs that have accumulated. And we're wanting to make sure we have even a better analysis of that with what we're doing this year. So I kind of along with Biff and Matt, you know, in terms of, you know, be careful you don't cut yourself short here in terms of your need and then create a situation where you're trying to explain.
We can we can do what Biff and Phipps want. And I agree with that. And we have a perfectly good explanation as to, number one, why we can't come in at what we promised. I mean, it was unexpected. It was it was something that we didn't anticipate. And I would like to put the blame on the vouchers, partly for, my own ideological reasons. So anyway,
We knew that was.
but anyway, I don't think we've deceived anyone here. And I think that, it's not that big a lift. I mean, if I were out of work and had to pay my taxes and, I'd be crying, but for the most part, it's not that big a lift. And I think the reasons why we do this, honestly, you just have to take some pictures, put them in the newspaper and say, we gotta fix this stuff, folks,
Tony?
I think everyone's bringing up some really good points, and I think this is some really good discussion. And, I just keep thinking back to, we got an extra $5 million this year, right?
Yeah.
And so let me finish. And so Jim just brought up a good point though, and maybe I'm just thinking about this the wrong way, is the net, right? So ultimately, that's really what matters, is the net impact. And maybe I'm just missing it in this presentation, and I apologize if I am, but the net impact to taxpayers, when you factor in all the changes that are outside of our control, right? That's really what I want to understand. And if I'm hearing you guys right tonight in this presentation, the net impact is, if we were going to go back and it's going to be more than we thought it was, or is the net going to be the same? Because if the net's the same, then we're all just wasting time talking about it. What if it's
increase with the budget is $6 million, $6,022,000. But when I take out the factors, like when I look at all of the items that were projected within the budget that are our expenditures, it's $4.4 million. So we really actually came in lower, but have these other, we have eight cuts within there, and then the increased expenditure for vouchers. Those, you know, really, we came in quite well with our projections, contrary to how it looks here, you know, just the unknown factors.
What was the cost of the special education? How much more did we have to underwrite to balance that budget?
That ended up being,
How much more than what we had projected?
$1.8 million.
So $1.8 million coming out of the general fund to balance special education.
Now, is that prior to the number you gave me earlier or
They don't do shit
after?
Easy, buddy.
As in you said,
No swear.
you had said we were right around 20 million in there? I guess what I'm saying is,
For our fund balance.
all
Not
right.
100% sure I'm with you on that.
I'm not 100% sure I'm with myself on all, to be honest with you.
This is the
The
one
only thing
I-
I see is that the extra expenditure that we had for the vouchers and things was right around $750,000. We have that in this fund balance.
Yeah.
So we can cover that and still continue forth with what we're doing without adding that. Like, I just see us, what are we gonna do with that if we go to scenario 2 or 3 or even, or whatever? I see it, well, let's hold on to this in case, but we'll just take more from, I can't get with that.
One of the questions I would have is.
We can cover our loss, is what I'm saying.
If we did scenario, let's just say we did scenario 1, and we're doing it because we want to fix our buildings and put money into that, how much more this year are we adding to that to cover those expenditures if we go with option 1? If I'm making sense.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure. So, I mean, the increase on the budget overall, I mean, it's, I'm trying to think of, just say that.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the sentiment in the room is that we'd really like to, you know, we've done good with our staff, giving
Yes.
wage, things like that. But what we really want to focus on is making sure that we are in a pattern of providing and funding for these, you know, buildings and grounds expenses that we're going to have. So what I want to know is if we do, scenario 1 or 2 or 3, how much more is that going to give us to go into that mission that we have, you know, expenditure than if we go with something less? Does that make sense?
What's in the existing budget, scenario 1, additional for facilities?
Yeah.
And then what would be potentially available in scenario 2 and 3 above that?
Yeah, sure, that's kind of, no, thank you. We had $500,000 additional as a part of the referendum projections, and that was added in here. Okay, and so, so that would be, that's already sort of worked into the budget plans, and we've already done some of the projects. You know, there's some roofing work at Lincoln, you know, some of those things that were already done to use up some of that planned cost. Scenario 2 would give the district $1 million additional, and then the scenario 3 would give the district $3.5 million additional. And, you know, there would be ways to earmark that for certain projects approved by the board, of course. And there's always ways, like with any budget, if we don't expend something, to put it into that Fund 46. That's why we added $1.4 million at the end of this budget year. So I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you are, and so I guess what I want all of us to know that is really, we're only, if we took this 267,000 out of fund balance and put it in here and did option 1, we would only have an extra $267,000, right, to put into.
Well, we would be taking out an additional $600,000 more, so we would be in the $19 million range.
That just, taking out that 500,000, that gets us to the budget. That's nothing additional, that's why we were taking it out, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, like
so
if we would
there's
decide to
nothing
bring the
additional
levy
there.
down, yes, correct.
Right.
But we are.
And is that okay with everyone? This is what I'm saying.
That's if you,
So I just want to say that the way they budgeted it, so I don't know, I don't want to explain this too much, but the budget is they already projected money into those extra things. So they, when they build a budget, they're projecting money, let's say, let's put this much money into this account for like Fund 46. They already added from what it was last year, they added. So it's just made up money, right? It's made up money. They haven't spent it yet, but they're earmarking saying, we're gonna build a budget to try to have that money available. So if we wanted to not do that, we would just be taking away from the ability to have that funds available. So, does that answer your question? So, in
Not really,
scenario
because
one-
every option, we would still keep we'd still keep a $95 million budget, because that's what's being asked, but the amount that we would, take local taxpayers is different, correct?
Well, no matter, every scenario, it's gonna go up because of the state aid has fallen so much. So it's kind of a double whammy already, because property values have went up, which is like whatever. And then state aid went down, so he's trying to tell you, we're getting kind of hosed two ways. But I'm trying to say, well, I mean, we're gonna get hosed, but if we can somehow explain where we're going with the district, we can manage it, but.
Well, I can get on board with the keeping it the same, or scenario one is where I'm laying, just to put my cards out there.
Thank you. I'm not sure I got my question answered on the net impact, and if I missed it, I apologize, but I think what would be helpful is if we can break this down in layman's terms. So if the original scenario, and again, I'm just trying to equate this to the taxpayer, right? So taxpayers understand a tax bill, right? So they see a bill, let's just say the original scenario was gonna cost them $1,000 a year, right? What would scenario, one look like? What would two look like? What would three look like? If we can
That's in the
simplify it.
memo.
Yeah, is that in there or did I?
Correct,
Yeah,
yes.
if the projection was 720, that would be the tax amount total. The new targeted with the 14.6 property valuation is the same, well, it's, the tax rate's 626, but the tax amount is 720. And then scenario one is 737, the next one's 765, and then 841.
See that?
It's, bottom of page one of the memo.
Taxpayer impact.
Page 2.
I'm sorry, page 2, thank you.
And the other piece too is that the equalized value, I mean, while that estimate is 14% right now, that drives a little bit too, and that's not finalized as well,
Yeah,
so.
you won't know that number till October 1st. What we do with those estimates is the municipal numbers are released on August 15th. Kind of interpolate that to the school based on the percentage of the municipality within the school district. But what we don't know is what the growth was in the portion in the district compared to the portion outside the district. So a town A might have grown 14%, but the half in your district may have grown 16%, and the other portion may have grown only 12%. So we won't know that number until October 1st, but, we didn't want to obviously wait too long to have this discussion, because once you get into, you have two meetings possibly in October to kind of reconcile this. It gives you a chance to kind of think through some of the possibilities. The other thing in terms of the valuation, I meant to mention, and I forgot, is during the referendum process, the 720 was based on a 0% valuation. And some of your, and again, if your tax base stayed absolutely the same, there was no new property, no new tax base, then the 14%, what we're showing you is accurate. But somewhere in that growth, and we don't know yet, but probably somewhere between 1 and 2 kind of eyeballing the municipalities, again, not knowing how much of it's within your district and maybe your neighboring districts, is new growth, which I think you keep in mind when you're evaluating what that ultimate tax impact is, because if you get say 1% of new tax base, that would have lowered the 720 or increased the 626 to kind of reconcile, because that wasn't really part of the equation during the referendum process. It's not a huge factor, but it could be a couple of cents. And, so there's a lot of variables out there that we just don't know at this point.
That chart is great. Thank you. Sorry I missed that. But that really, what I think would be helpful is if, to Matt's point earlier, if we might be able to add, for each scenario, like here's the extra tangible things that we anticipate getting in the district if we raise it to this amount. Again, this is just a lot of information, and,
Yes.
I'm a numbers guy, I get numbers, but this is, I get like 200 pages of like data here, and I'm like, what am I looking at? So I think we need to lead with that simple chart and just add one more column to it that says, here are the other things that we can bring to our community, and just make it tangible so people can understand it without all these school finance. No offense to you guys, I know you guys do a good job, and thank you for this, but most people don't speak your language.
I think though that we did that, correct. I mean, when I look at the Fund 46, Long-Term Capital Improvements Trust, and we listed 4 items there, that's what we're looking to do with our current budget, correct? So that's what we're telling the taxpayers that we are going to do with that money
That's,
in the budget.
again, I'm just looking for, we gotta simplify it in like one graph, right? This is just a lot to digest. Most people, I have a hard time opening a board book, right? What do you think John Q. Public's gonna do? I mean, seriously, like, this is like really difficult to just process this amount of information.
And it's hard too, because once you get into a little bit of information, it gets really complicated quick. But the Fund 46 projects, I think it's easy to think that's attached to Fund 10 expenditures. Like that is 2 separate things. Right. I don't know if I just wanna make sure.
Yeah. Well, so, I don't see it on my form here, but we do have to approve the preliminary budget today, is that correct?
What happens is, we need to publish a notice that says this is the preliminary budget that we're bringing forward, for just the approval of the board, and that hearing takes place at the October 10th meeting. So we'll know the equalized value then, but this publication has to go to the paper, like within the week. So it's one of those things where we have to give a preliminary snapshot when the board approves the preliminary budget at the October 10th meeting, but then when we have the other factors and all information is gathered after October 15th, the board first officially finalizes the budget and sets the levy for the October 24th meeting. It's the dates. Yes, October 24th.
I understand what you said about the Fund 46 and those projects, but I also look at that extra is going to Washington Middle School and fixing that auditorium. And I don't know if you've been in there and seen some of the areas that need to be redone, or going to the high school and just going into bathrooms and getting rid of the old plastic dividers that have been sanded down and look terrible, and just going in and repairing stuff to make it more a school. Then I guess I don't expect those kind of things, and just to go in and take care of stuff and providing some extra budget money for Mike and his crew to be able to go in and fix some of those things in other schools. There's needs in every school that need to be taken care of, so it's a place that you really can be proud of.
Well, I would make a motion to do option 1. If anyone would second that.
Scenario.
Second.
Any discussion on option 1?
Do we talk about where we allocate the fund balances to? Is that in this discussion, or is it just a general, like I'm saying, like the Fund 10 compared to Fund 46 compared to the fund for
I think just to approve.
Well, the budget is here, and it tells where all the money, what they're recommending all the money goes to preliminarily.
So it's in our purview to talk about, well, do we need to have an extra, that that standing $1 million in the food service account, do we need to, like, is that something we can talk about now to say, hey, what's our long-term plan for where that money, are we gonna just leave $1 million in there? Or like, that's an example. I'm saying, is that in the purview to talk about that now, about where we put the
Yes.
Fund 10 to Fund 46?
The money from Fund 10, for example, you can't move to 10. 10 always has, Fund 50 cannot run in the negative, Fund 10 would have to backfill. But we are required, due to the amount of excessive fund balance we have in Fund 50 right now, to work at bringing that down. Now.
What does that mean? Like, I know what you said, but like,
We have to work to spend money that we have
will
in
we
that
get slapped on
fund
the
balance.
wrist? Do we get put in the timeout? What happened?
Well, the first year that you just have to say, we're working to buy, large capital items. So last year.
Through paper, we have to show what we're gonna do with the money.
Angela, can you lower the cost of the charges to kids also to help balance?
We can, but we would have more of a deficit at this point, yes.
I mean, I recognize long-term in terms of you could always raise them up, but I mean, that.
That is always an
hardware,
option as well.
equipment, but it's a food service expense that you have to,
Correct. Like, we could have had that option.
not for something else.
Yeah,
Like food service infrastructure would
Yes.
fall in that purview?
correct. So we did like,
Freezers or something?
dishwasher replacements. We're coming up on 20 years of our food service program, which is excellent, and we have a lot of equipment that needs to be replaced.
So my discussion about it is the only thing, I would rather see more money going towards Fund 46 than Fund 10 in general. That's my only statement, but I would be okay with 49. Just propose.
If you would want more money going to 46, you would have to transfer that out of your Fund 10
Now or during?
as a part of the budget.
I'd be curious to know what do you guys recommend?
Didn't expect that.
You guys are,
I would recommend scenario 1.
Oh, you would?
Balances our budget, it addresses our strategic planning that we went through the referendum. It addresses all the factors, that that the state has passed through with vouchers. But it's the board's decision, and so, that's just where it's at.
Yeah, we've talked a lot, and again, I'm not a resident, so I'm not.
6 point.
I was gonna say, so I don't want to spend other people's money, but, I think, obviously, I think the discussion here has been very good. The sensitivity to the expectation of the taxpayers to the referendum, I think that cannot be, minimized. And then you just have to balance that against some of the factors that are somewhat out of your control, that maybe you're gonna throw that a little bit off, which we don't know. The valuation could come at a number that puts it right where you want it. And it's a non-issue then. We just don't have all the information, but unfortunately, the information comes very late in the process. And that's why the need for this conversation to kind of feel out what the thoughts of the board and the direction they want to go. So administration can have time to kind of provide additional information or prepare certain things as you get closer to budget approval.
One of the things, I was just thinking, to what Matt said, I mean, we make a preliminary budget now, so, and set the preliminary tax levy that we're looking at, but it's still a $95 million budget. And before we sign the dotted line of what that's gonna look like, even in between all these, formality things that we need to do, we can talk about the funds and where the money is. So we can put that on another agenda just to focus on that. It wouldn't change what we need to do today, but because I don't hear anyone saying, let's get it down to 90 million, right? Let's get rid of 5 million or whatever, right? But we're talking about maybe we want, instead of 1,000 here, we'd rather put 1,000 here. I think that we can do that just in one of our general sessions, one of our 2 sessions. Let's talk about those things seriously, but set our budget. If we're okay with where it is now, preliminary set this stuff in motion and then talk about the funds at a different time is what I would.
And having a meeting, like either another one, in September or in October, I mean, that's definitely something, you know, I'm happy to prepare information from anytime. Likely at this point, I would just present for the budget hearing, the preliminary budget as you were presented here.
Correct.
You know, just because of all of the unknown factors. Even when I'll stand and give the budget hearing, I'll say in my head, oh, but it's really like here, you know, I already know our summer school count is higher than I projected. You know, so there's a lot of factors that go into here. I mean, I would say if you'd wanna have the most useful discussion around the final information, we would want to plan a meeting early the week after the 15th of October, because we would know everything then.
Okay.
And so then we would be able to say like, okay, this is really how it's gonna shake down. Otherwise, I'm doing on estimates, so.
Sure.
We need that. Yeah, I think we need that for sure. And Jim, I'm curious, are you, any thoughts on that scenario one?
Oh, what's hard is that, you know, I don't have, you know, the one thing of additional need that we recognize is the facilities. But I'm also recognizing the need that we haven't really mapped out yet in terms of, we got a good strategy for raising student achievement levels. But if kids are 2 or 3 years behind grade level, you know, I'm also thinking of instructional needs and, you know, stuff like this. Anytime you start using too much of your general fund for facilities, you're cutting off your programming. You're already cutting back your general fund to balance special education, which is critical. So, you know, but I don't have that information totally to, you know, to say that absolutely I'd go not with one, but two. You know, I do know that money would be good use because you could put it over into the facilities fund. You know, to the extent that, you know, that's gonna be there and you can mentally start accelerating some of this work. And some of the work just might be a lot more expensive than it was originally planned. You know, we got, you know, so it's out there. So I don't have all the information to.
And I probably, and I think probably a lot of us probably would be more apt to do something like that if that facilities plan was done and we knew and could tell the public, this is exactly what we're going to be doing and prioritizing, which won't be done until.
And, you know, before people, you know, we were talking about, you know, how much is, you know, facilities gonna be needed. Now, we definitely wanted to separate out needs from wants. You know, we really need to know, and we also need to know that we're getting a good return, our facilities are meeting our needs, and we know we're utilizing space appropriately.
Right, yeah.
I'm still kind of frustrated with the fact that we're sitting on a fund balance that we could cover this with instead of going back. I have a hard time looking at that and then going to the public for that money when we had already promised that we were gonna try to give it back as much. This may not sound relevant, but it is. 2 years ago, we were still using federal funds for kids' lunches. And then last year, we decided, you know, to brace the impact for the families, we would cover that as well. So we paid that out of our funds last year as well too. That wasn't federal grant, that was coming from us. Do you remember the amount on that?
For the ESSER funding or for the CE?
To pay for the school lunches for youth?
Well, we had $300,000 more revenues last year as a result of that.
So it was about $300,000? I don't know, if you're gonna take more out for taxes on everything else, then I say you add that in and pull it out and pay for the kids' lunches the rest of the year too.
And that we're not able to reverse that CEP decision at this time, because we have to waive that by June 30th of every year.
I'm just saying, we literally just got done going through this and now, you know, that's also added on top of it. Now we're still sitting on that money while we go elsewhere to get it. It's the same thing I'm looking at the federal government for and being upset about in the first place. And now here I am in the position to do it. And it drives me nuts. So I will vote no on it, on a principled no for either one of those scenarios.
We're not even voting on anything today, right? This is just.
We gotta approve one of those scenarios.
It's not actionable though, it's just as information
The
discussion.
challenging thing too is we received federal funds and the state did not provide additional per pupil funding through the 2 years of the biennial budget because of that.
Yeah.
just another like big picture thing, like our mill rates in 21-22 was $7.42 because of the property tax relief and the additional aids last year, it went down to $5.51 where it currently is. And if we're looking at $6.26, we are, I mean, it's gonna impact our taxpayers. We educated them on that through the referendum, but we are still gonna be bargain basement per thousand compared to all other districts in the county. And the average of the state, I would say, be pretty safe to say.
You know, I would estimate that the average tax rate for schools for 23-24 would be in the low $6 something.
I know but I have a hard time accepting, hey, you guys should pay more because everybody else is paying more. I made a commitment to use what we were gonna use and then get back as much as we could, or not use as much as we could. I don't know.
And the challenge is we don't know items with the biennial budget.
That I do understand, yeah, we're in the dark.
Business, like, so with, Tony's talking about his business, he can kind of project out certain costs and he knows not everything, but a little more control over it.
Right, and we're in the dark because we don't know everything right now. I understand that, I do, but, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to point out to everyone here that we have to provide a preliminary budget legally as a starting point so that we can have a budget hearing.
Yes.
And at that point, you are certainly free, whether you vote for or against the preliminary budget, to vote to amend future budgets and to vote to approve or not approve the final budget, even if it precisely matches the preliminary budget that you voted for. So voting for the preliminary budget is voting to authorize a starting point budget that is presented publicly and that the budget presentation that builds from this comes from.
Correct.
And you are in no way guaranteeing that you will vote for the final one, even if it exactly matches. But I'm not suggesting that you should vote in bad faith. I'm just saying this is where we need to.
With that said, I think that we have discussed this, and I think that we should go and vote for the motion that is on the floor.
Is there an advantage of, like, just strategically, as we kind of try to build this thing, through the hearing and then, is there an advantage or disadvantage for going for one? I know that's the motion. Or three. I mean, three we can come down on, I guess, but one, boy, that's pretty mudsill, isn't it?
It's a hard sell, Carrie.
The option one balances our budget, we would have to come up with a plan for the additional revenues if we were to go that route, which we can, and we're not short of needs, so I'm not sure.
Okay, so all in favor of going with the preliminary budget, which is option one. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
I'm a no.
2 noes, Biff and Matthew Spalding. Okay. All right, our next item is the miscellaneous compensation rates. Thank you, Mike, appreciate it. The miscellaneous compensation rates, this was Angela and Mike, if you'd like to talk about those.
Yes, it's been 7 school years since we've addressed several of these sort of miscellaneous compensation rates. There are things that happen on a very regular basis. Employees will have the opportunity to work on curriculum projects, help with interview processes, and many other things. So there's a sort of a long range of different compensation that's included in this. And so it was built within the budget, these rates, and planned for. specifically the school forest rate is interesting because that hasn't been addressed in over 10 years. And I know, Colin, in our discussions for finance and budget committee topics, had just mentioned that, you know, just to review that. So went through and discussed it with Kelly Voron and just, you know, would like to make the recommendation that we approve these rates for the miscellaneous compensation areas. Huh?
Oh, okay. You wanna make, go ahead, Chris.
Move to
Make it-
approve. Yeah, me, second.
Second, okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
That was good.
And then the next one is our Lincoln High School Tower fundraising.
Motion to approve.
And let's see. This is just, if you, just in looking at the memo, this was just to authorize a fundraising that would start the campaign for the tower.
Right.
Any discussion on that at all? I don't see this as an actionable item. Is it supposed to be?
You know, it was similar to what we did with the track, you know, to
Okay.
approve that initiative so that the foundation knows that you would support work on the tower and.
So do we have a motion and a second to approve?
You already had a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you already
Sorry.
did.
Sorry, you're so fast.
Second.
Second?
Grant permission, that's good wording. With Jim Macy, that was all covered, the wording's fine?
I didn't check this with.
Okay. That's my concern last time was that it needs to be correct, so. That was my concerns.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Just a couple things. One is that WASB 2023 Fall Regional Meeting does fall on one of our board meetings, does it not?
Yeah, and that's when we're gonna be approving the final October 24th.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't think that any of us can go to that. There's another one that came out too is Saturday, November 4th, is another one that's coming up to interesting topics, the new reading law, also just about declining enrollment and how it's affecting Wisconsin schools. So lots of different things. It's a Saturday, so that's just something to be thinking about. And then, you know, I know everybody gets this, the school news. I thought page 25, I thought was interesting. You know, again, with our talk with governance, it talks about accountability and different ways that, you know, WASB talks about a governance checklist. So, you know, just something interesting for everybody to read. And those are all the comments I have. And future meeting dates, we have our regular meeting, which is October 10th, I believe, correct? Is that our next one?
September 26th.
I'm sorry, September 26th. And then October is, I have the finance on the brain here. Anything else as final meeting dates that we have? Future meeting dates. Okay. Seeing none, we will vote to go into closed session. Board of Education will vote to convene in this for the purpose of considering the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance eval data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. He is authorized pursuant to section 19.85 subsection 1C of the Wisconsin statutes. And I would need a motion and a second.
I'll second.
Okay, and we do need a roll call vote for that.
Christopher Abel,
Aye.
Vic Hansen.
Yes.
Matthew Phipps.
Yes.
Stacy Seldner.
Yes.
Matthew Spalding.
Yes.
Gary Trask.
Yes.
Tony Vostelka.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a couple minutes to clear the room and.
Carrie.